It's now time to wrap up this lesson series. We'll tackle what are the common features to all cells and how can a living thing be composed of non-living parts. So we've been learning about a cell and using our bacteria cell as an example. It's equipped with proteins to do the chemistry of life and a library of recipes to build those proteins. That recipe can be duplicated. Let's take a look then at the universal features of all cells. Cells have a boundary that controls the entry of nutrients and exit of wastes. All cells have a cell membrane, but this bacteria also has a cell wall. Not all cells have a cell wall. Cells have a fluid interior where the chemistry of life occurs, and we've seen what that chemistry amounts to. Proteins extracting energy and proteins building things. Cells extract energy and resources from the environment to maintain life, so all cells have to be powered by energy from the environment in some fashion. Cells have a team of molecular machines called proteins that do a wide variety of tasks needed to keep the cell alive. These tasks include processing energy, building the cell's molecular parts, repairing damage, carrying out cell reproduction, etc. And finally, cells have a set of information molecules called DNA that carry the instructions for making the proteins, the molecular machines. DNA can be duplicated so that cells can reproduce. We're going to use an analogy here that cells are like modern cars. They have a boundary, so that would be the body of the car. They have an engine. That's the metabolic engine carried out by proteins that are breaking down food molecules and building cell parts. And they have a computer, and we'll call that the DNA, the recipes for building the proteins. All cells have these three basic functional parts: boundary, a metabolic engine, and a computer. Bacteria have a cell membrane and many have a cell wall. Cytoplasm fills the interior of the cell where proteins perform the chemistry of life. DNA stores the information to make the cell's proteins. Now this picture, we see paramecia. These are single-celled organisms that swim around in ponds and streams. And we see the blue structure here is the nucleus of the cell. So the nucleus is a nuclear membrane that surrounds the DNA of this paramecium cell. Now, a nucleus is not a universal feature of a cell. Bacteria cells do not have a nuclear membrane surrounding their DNA. You'll recall in our picture here, we just have DNA sort of floating in the cytoplasm. There's no membrane around the DNA. That's what a nucleus would be. Bacteria do not have mitochondria, which provide energy for larger and more complex cells, and we'll learn more about mitochondria in later lessons. So bacteria are the smallest kinds of cells, are very diverse, and they inhabit every corner of the planet. In this scene here, we see both kinds of cells. The small bacteria cells, that's these little cells here. There are lots of them in this picture. And then these giant cells. These are single-celled organisms, a paramecium over here, and an amoeba. There's one part of an amoeba here. And these are complex single-celled organisms, meaning they have a nucleus and mitochondria, and they're just huge compared to bacteria. All these little rod-like things, those would be bacteria cells. We've arrived at the last question: how can a living thing be composed of non-living parts? We've learned that the entire bacteria cell is alive. And remember, to be alive is to satisfy all of these characteristics in this list here. Highly organized, self-maintaining. Check. The bacteria satisfies that. Use energy, performs metabolism. Check. Reproduces, shows heredity. We'll say more about this. The DNA molecule can be duplicated, and so the offspring can have a full set of the recipes to build all the proteins, so the bacteria cell can reproduce. Possess adaptations. All of these proteins are molecular adaptations. They are parts with purposes. They have a specific chemical reaction to perform. Evolutionary change, we'll see again in later lessons how as these bacteria reproduce, there can be changes to the recipe, and that allows organisms to evolve over time. They grow. As the cell makes new parts, it will grow, respond to their environment, and of course the bacteria cell is a cell. But again, the strange thing is that the living cell is composed of these molecules. And these molecules are not alive. Amino acids are not alive. Glucose is not alive. Lipid molecules are not alive. Proteins are not alive. DNA, not alive. So what we have then is that cells are made of molecules which are not alive. A living thing is composed of non-living parts. That's the puzzle we have to wrap our brains around. And this has significance because it means then that the interaction of non-living molecules creates a living cell. This means that life is a process. Life is not a static thing, it's a process. These molecules have to be interacting in the right way within this boundary for the whole entity to be alive.